We are back. It is 7:39 on this Friday morning with a search for solutions as scientists and lawmakers around the world race to stop the coronavirus pandemic. Savannah, you spent some time yesterday with someone who is stepping up to help in a big way.
Yeah, absolutely. Billionaire entrepreneur Bill Gates has his foundation and has donated more than $250 million to COVID-19 research. He's also throwing resources behind tests, treatments, and vaccines for the virus. We spoke at length yesterday about what the future looks like and his prediction of a pandemic years ago that he hoped would better prepare us for what we're now facing. You have made fighting infectious disease really your life's work, at least the second half of your life. And my first question is just where we are right now in terms of this pandemic, that famous saying, are we at the end of the beginning or at the beginning of the end?
I wish I could say that we're halfway through, but I don't think so. It takes time to make a vaccine. There's a lot about the disease we don't understand. We know that we can get out of this, but it's going to be a while before things go back to normal.
You famously talked about a coming pandemic, this nightmare scenario back in 2015 on the heels of the Ebola crisis. And you said in your TED Talk that you worried about a virus that could be 1,000 times worse.
If anything kills over 10 million people in the next few decades, it's most likely to be a highly infectious virus rather than a war.
Is this that virus?
Yes, the human-to-human respiratory spread is the scariest scenario. It's a nightmare. I wish it had come, 5 or 10 years later. Then governments might have done the preparation to move quickly, like a few governments did, and the technologies would have been further along.
Let's talk about what's happening right now. There are states like Georgia poised to reopen some parts of their economy. What's your thought on the wisdom of that? Is there anywhere in the country that's ready for that kind of reopening?
We know that if you go fully back to normal mixing, that then you get onto that exponential growth curve. I am afraid we'll have some people and some states that move too quickly and have to back off.
Dr. Fauci said he's certain there will be a second wave of this virus. What's your perspective on how bad it could be?
If we're still being careful about social contact, if we've got the testing capacity up, I'm hopeful that the fall will not be nearly as bad as this first peak. The flu is a challenge because the symptoms are common enough that knowing exactly who to test, which are people with symptoms, will be a little confused because of all those flu infections.
The Gates Foundation is very much at the forefront on this hunt for a vaccine. We've all learned by now the timeline, the hopeful timeline of 12 to 18 months. That is a highly expedited track, a fast track for a vaccine. Can you explain why?
Well, usually a vaccine takes over 5 years because you have many steps that you want to do in a serial way. Here, because of all the incredibly negative effects, the sooner the better. There are 100 efforts, but maybe 10 of those should get the resources to build factories and go full speed ahead. So, the best scientists working hard on this, and I'm hopeful. In fact, in the last few weeks, I've seen signs that we may get to the optimistic side of that time projection.
If there has been any area that seems to have been bedeviling during this crisis, it's testing. I wonder how you assess how the U.S. has done on testing and what seems to be the issue here.
Well, many countries decided that at the national level they would orchestrate the testing. That hasn't happened in the United States. It might not happen, but the access to tests is just, chaotic.
The president has said that he's going to put funding for the World Health Organization on hold. What effect do you think that will have right now, pulling that funding in the midst of a pandemic?
I'm hopeful that we won't cut that money off. In fact, WHO needs more resources during this time to step up to their role of international coordination. The world wants the U.S. to play that role in terms of research and funding and collaboration. And so that's still an opportunity that the U.S. has that we haven't seized yet.
I know you're working on behalf of the Gates Foundation, so your self-isolation is not equal to ours. I guess you're not watching Tiger King on Netflix or eating too much, but what are you doing with the extra time you may find yourself with these days?
Well, my daughter did get me to watch Tiger King. At night, a little distraction is allowed, even though it's a busy time.
Let's talk about the world going forward. Dr. Fauci said the other day, I think he was half joking, that maybe handshaking is a thing of the past now, or should be. Have you thought about what's changed forever?
I do think some of the digital approaches that were catching on anyway have been accelerated. Even I'm surprised that doing these meetings digitally for a lot of things works pretty well. We really need experts in government, and they need to think through these scenarios to protect us for any future pandemic. I think it will be a lot of change. I hope it's more about the world working together to solve big problems.
Actually, guys, Gates has likened this fight against COVID-19 to a world war, except this time we're all on the same side. So he's really hopeful that just like we saw during World War II, there will be an explosion of innovation and ingenuity, especially when it comes to vaccines and testing, so that we're less vulnerable in the future when this happens again. And he thinks it's inevitable that it will happen again.
That's a fascinating conversation.
I was surprised to hear that 12 to 18 months for the vaccine was the fast track. I thought that was the expected track. I've learned a lot from that.
Oh, yes.
And I was equal.
It's a huge fast track. And actually, he's actually hopeful. And I think this was the most interesting thing that he said. And he knows, because he knows all the different vaccines that are potentially in the pipeline, that maybe it'll be on the shorter end of that. That would be huge. It would just be totally unprecedented in terms of the science.
Arguably, no one has put their money where their mouth is, like Bill Gates. And to think that he also watches Tiger King, Savannah. He really is just like the rest of us.
Well, I know. And then we chatted afterwards, and we both felt a little guilty about liking Tiger King.
All right, Savannah, that was fun.